Hey everyone, tonight we re-diving into the legend of the Viking Berserker, the wild Norse warrior who stormed into battle bare-chested, possibly intoxicated, definitely furious. But before we begin, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, only if you're genuinely enjoying these stories, and drop a comment with your current location and time. It's always amazing seeing how many of you tune in from different corners of the world. Now, get comfy, dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan to get that soft hum in the background. Let's wander into tonight's story together. It's a boy, a loud one. You don't so much arrive in the world as detonate into it. Fists clenched, cheeks flushed, voice echoing off every wall. You cry, no, scream, for 7 straight minutes. The village midwife swears it's a record. The local priest tries to bless you and earns to bite marks for his trouble. While other babies coo and nap peacefully, you scowl at the ceiling like it owes you tribute. When you cry, the family goat refuses to come near the house, and you cry often. By the time you're crawling, you've already left a trail of bruised shins, startled livestock, and cracked pottery in your wake. You've headbutted the hearthstone, gnawed on a sheep's ear, and once tried to wrestle your own shadow. Your father quietly tells the neighbors that you'll grow out of it while tying a bandage around his leg. While other children cherish their wooden toys, you snap yours in two and pretend they're axes. You shout at trees for fun. You once challenged a rock to a duel and only lost because your cousin tackled you mid-roar. You begin to earn a reputation. The older villagers whisper terms like spirited, untamed, or occasionally possessed. You're no longer allowed near the mead barrels after you bit through the wooden tap. At age 4, the village shaman claims you have fire in your blood. Your grandmother suggests it's just worms. Either way, everyone agrees. Your future will involve yelling, bruises, and probably a sword or two. You've started dragging around a stick you call the enemy, and you talk to it when no one's looking. It never replies, not yet. In a cold northern village of serious men and quiet labor, you're a whirlwind with bare feet and mud in your hair. You aren't made for farming. You weren't born for peace. You're being carved, bit by bit, into something wilder. You snap your first wooden training sword within an hour, not in battle practice, but because you swung it during breakfast and hit a support beam. The entire longhouse creaks. Your father just sighs and keeps eating. You've been banned from the chicken yard several times. You demanded a rematch. By age 6, you've made a shield out of a broken barrel lid and charged through the laundry lines. Clothes go flying. Your mother calls you a walking storm. Your grandmother says you're possessed by a warrior's ghost. If something runs, you chase it. The village learns to adapt. Fences are reinforced. Kids play farther from your house. Girls whisper and point. One brave boy calls you goat-trained, like the time you climbed the fish-drying rack for training and fell. The fish caught you. Now, when it rains, you smell faintly of haddock. Occasionally, someone suggests sending you to the temple for spiritual guidance. The temple politely refuses, so you remain the village's problem child. Always scraped, always muddy, always loud. No one tries to tame you. No one dares. By 7, it's clear you won't be a quiet farmer. You'll be a loud problem. People stop asking, what's wrong with him? And start wondering, can we point him at our enemies? There's something in the way you stare down thunderstorms, something in how you run like you're attacking the earth itself. When they did, you were already chewing on a ladle. Your body is covered in scrapes and bruises. The healer has stopped treating them all. Now she just pats your shoulder and says, "Try to land on something soft next time." It's the deep, feral bark of someone who scared himself and liked it. You once fell off a roof, smashed into a barrel, rolled through a crate of onions, and broke your arm. You said it was the best day of your life. You start naming your sticks: Skulticler, Stick of Pain. You duel trees. Some trees lose chores. You don't do them. Every task ends in fire. Once it was the bench. Once your own shirt. You don't wear that style anymore. Whatever it is, you've become more than just a rowdy child. Wolves keep their distance. Birds fly off when you approach. You're becoming something else. By age 10, someone finally says, "Maybe we should train him." No one volunteers. Stand 20 feet away and yell things like, "More axe, less teeth." You don't train. You attack. Trees, hay, chickens. Gore doesn't correct your form. You don't have one. What you have is velocity and the reckless confidence of a boy who once challenged a storm cloud to a wrestling match. They hand you a wooden axe so blunt it barely counts as a weapon. You sharpen it on a rock. The rock breaks. Gore gives you a heavier axe the next day. You thank him by swinging it mid-sentence and knocking his drinking horn into the fire. He nods. You'll go far. Other kids train with discipline. You train with noise. Others learn technique. You develop a one-on-one relationship with destruction. Then they teach you wrestling. Your first match ends when you suplex a kid named Eggle into a puddle. So hard, he starts stuttering. From that day on, Eagle develops a nervous twitch any time someone mentions your name. Training continues. Sort of. While others practice forms and technique, you're chasing squirrels through the training field with a spear you named Tooth Collector. Gore doesn't bother correcting you anymore. He simply points toward a target and yells, "Go break that." You oblige. By 11, your muscles are growing faster than your manners. Your voice deepens slightly, just enough to frighten a group of traveling merchants who thought you were a small, angry adult. You've mastered the art of the sudden roar, and you use it liberally during meals, while climbing trees, or just because it's quiet and you find that suspicious. At night, you don't sleep, you collapse. Usually after wrestling logs, lifting rocks, or chasing your own echo around the fjord. Sometimes you dream of battle. Sometimes you sleepwalk and wake up in someone else's goat pen. You've collected a strange assortment of bruises, scratches, and scars, none of which you remember receiving. One across your ribs looks like the rune for storm. Your grandmother says it's a sign. Your mother says you probably ran into a doorframe. Your appetite keeps growing. You eat enough for 3 men and somehow never get full. The village butcher now prepares an extra haunch just for you. During one midsummer feast, you ate a full rabbit pie, half a salmon, and a leg off a roasted pig before anyone else had finished their soup. When they finally noticed, you were licking the carving knife and smiling with your eyes. No one tried to stop you. Your reputation spreads. Children from neighboring villages come to look at you. Some bring dares. You accept all of them. Climb that tree, fight that goat, jump into the freezing river. You do it all, often shirtless, sometimes yelling. Once you tried to outrun your own scream. By 12, you're allowed to join the village on mock raids. It's mostly ceremonial, a way to teach young warriors strategy and teamwork. You, however, treat it like actual war. You scream at the enemy line, who are, in this case, your own uncles. You knock over 3 barrels and a ladder. You chase someone's horse. You accidentally start a small fire with your enthusiasm. The elders aren't sure whether to be proud or terrified. Gore, your mentor, watches it all with a satisfied grunt. Told you he'd go far, he says. As someone dumps water on the smoking fence post, you begin to grow into your legend. No longer just the loud child, now a force of nature. Villagers start calling you names like Stormborn, Goatbane, or that boy. One man swears you stared down a wolf in the forest. Another claims you headbutted a boulder in half. This is untrue. The boulder was already cracked, but no one corrects the story. Your stick has evolved into a real weapon now. A battle club carved from ashwood and wrapped in strips of old leather. You named it Whisper, because it's the last thing people hear before it hits them. You still train, if you can call it that. Gore has moved on to just pointing at things and letting you figure out how to destroy them. Your technique is unique. You leap more than strike. You roar before you charge. You've bitten 2 weapons and 1 opponent. At this point, it's unclear whether you're learning combat or simply inventing a new style of it. At 13, you retaken to a neighboring village for your first real trial. A mock duel with another trainee. His name is Sturla. He's calm, precise, and technically gifted. The fight lasts 6 seconds. You scream, charge, and tackle him so hard he flies into a barrel of pickled fish. The crowd is silent. Then someone claps, then another. Soon, you're being lifted onto shoulders. The local healer sighs and walks over to check on Sturla. That night, someone carves a new rune on the post outside the training hall. It looks like a jagged flame. No one explains what it means. You don't ask. Your family has adjusted. Your father has stopped trying to discipline you and instead teaches you how to swing an axe properly while standing very far away. Your mother mends your torn clothes and stops asking questions about the stains. Your dog, Thoric, now runs ahead of you on purpose, warning others that the storm is coming. You still don't smile much, but your laughter is louder now, fuller, deeper. It's not just noise anymore. It's you. It's your signature. When people hear it, they know something's about to break. By 14, you begin to outgrow the village. Your power doesn't fit in these fences anymore. There's talk of sending you to the Jarl Escort, a place where warriors are shaped into legends. You like the idea, not because of glory or gold, but because you hear they have bigger targets. You've started talking to the sky, not in prayers, in challenges. You don't ask the gods for strength. You dare them to match yours. Your friends are few, but those who stay with you, the brave, the strange, the slightly unhinged, become fiercely loyal. They call themselves the Roaring Band. They follow you not out of fear, but because you make life louder, messier, and somehow more alive. You once built a raft, declared it a warship, and tried to invade a neighboring inlet. You were intercepted halfway and towed back by 3 fishermen. You thanked them for the battle and vowed to return. You meant it. Your dreams grow larger. Now, when you sleep rarely, you see fire, war, massive halls full of song and steel. You wake up with your fists clenched and a grin on your face. You still challenge your reflection to duels. You still talk to your stick, but now you also listen. Because deep down, Under the chaos and splinters, you know what you are. You're not just a wild child anymore. You're something ancient, something raw, a spirit wrapped in skin and noise. The kind of being whispered about in fireside tales. The kind of warrior sagas are written about. You're becoming a berserker. And the world doesn't even know what's coming. By 15, you no longer fit into doorways without ducking. Your voice is gravel and thunder, and your footsteps send chickens scattering before you even round a corner. The village finally agrees. You've outgrown them, not just in strength, but in presence. They don't know whether to throw you a farewell feast or just quietly open the gates and hope you leave on your own. You're sent north to train among the Jarl's personal war band, not as a favor, not as an honor, but as a solution. You don't take offense. You take your axe, your club, your dog, and your ambition. The journey takes 2 weeks, half of which you spend chasing deer, wrestling bushes, and challenging echoes in the valley. When you arrive, muddy and laughing, the gate guards stare. You don't knock. You bang your club against the wooden gates and shout, "I'm here to fight something." It's not the most diplomatic entrance, but it gets results. They let you in. The Jarl's Hall is a fortress of stone, smoke, and warriors who eat with their helmets nearby, just in case. They eye you cautiously. You eye the feast table. One of them, a broad-shouldered woman named Brindis, asks if you re here to serve or to learn. You say, whichever means more bruises. They welcome you. Your training begins at dawn, and you discover, for the first time, you're not the strongest. Not yet. These warriors have been forged in fire and raids. Their scars tell stories older than you. But what you lack in experience, you make up for in pure feral willpower. Where others fight to win, you fight to test the world's patience. You're given a real axe now, iron-forged, not sharpened to deadly levels, but close enough. You name it hunger. The others laugh until they see how you swing it, like it is trying to escape your grip and eat everything in reach. Your first sparring match is against a man called Rurik the Calm. He fights like water, measured, smooth, efficient. You fight like a landslide. The match lasts a full minute before you break his shield and knock him into a barrel of salted fish. He stands, bruised, and nods. "You're not technique," he says. "You're intent with legs." You take it as a compliment. Nights are colder now. The air stings your skin. The warriors sleep in furs, snoring loudly. You sleep shirtless beside Thorik, listening to the wind and imagining distant drums. You don't dream of peace. You dream of charging into storms with a roar so loud the gods take notice. Then it happens. One morning, a horn sounds from the tower. A real raid, not practice, not mock battle. Real enemies. Raiders from across the sea, torching farms and stealing cattle. A small force is dispatched. You're told to stay. You don't. You're not even invited. You just walk beside the warriors until someone says, "Fine. If he dies, he dies." You say, "If I die, the sky falls with me." The battlefield is a frozen field, dotted with black smoke and frightened villagers. The raiders are taller, leaner, faster, but not ready for what walks onto that field with bare arms and wild eyes. You don't wait for the order to charge. You scream once, loud and long, and then you're moving, not running, colliding. The first enemy swings. You duck, swing upward. The sound your axe makes is like a song with sharp teeth. Another man lunges. You slam into him with your shield, or what's left of it, and he topples. Someone tries to grab you from behind. You bite him. The Jarl's men call it madness. You call it focus. By the end of it, your arms are numb, your knuckles raw, and your tunic torn down the middle. Blood, yours, theirs, you're not sure, soaks your chest. You're laughing. Not because it's over, but because you're ready for more. The survivors stare. Some step away. Brindis walks up to you, eyeing the chipped edge of your axe. Tell me what that was, she says. You look up at the smoky sky, your chest heaving. That, you grin, was the beginning. After the raid, no one questions your place among them. You're not just accepted, you're studied, watched, respected, feared. You eat with the warriors now, and they no longer laugh when you speak to your axe or train by chasing wolves through the woods. One evening, the Jarl calls for you. You've heard of the berserkers, he says, the true ones, the old ones, warriors so lost to fury, they become beasts in battle. Their rage is their armor, their scream is their shield. You nod, he leans forward. We think you might be one. The word hits like thunder in your chest, not surprise, recognition. The berserkers, chosen of Odin, feared even by their own. Stories say they feel no pain, swing with strength beyond human bones, and fight in a trance that blurs man and monster. You're told there's a rite, a test, not a battle, but something deeper, a madness trial. Not everyone survives it. Most don't. You smile. When do we begin? The next moon, you're taken to the woods, alone. No weapons, just you, your fury, and the dark. The berserker trial is part myth, part torment. 3 nights. No food, no fire, no shelter. Only voices in the trees and your own heartbeat, which by the 3rd day sounds like a war drum echoing in your ribs. You fight cold, hunger, visions, a dream where a giant bear speaks to you in riddles. You wake up growling. You return on the 4th day, your eyes bloodshot, your fists raw. You're not the same. You walk into the Jarl's hall. No one speaks. Then Gore, your first trainer, steps forward, old and limping. He looks you in the eyes and simply says, "Welcome back, warrior. You have passed. You are now berserker." From the moment you return, things shift. No one calls you by your old name anymore. Not out of disrespect, but because it doesn't fit. What walks out of those woods isn't the wild child who wrestled shadows and bit roosters. It's something sharper, heavier, honed. You wear no title, but everyone knows you are berserker now. You don't speak of what happened in the forest. No one asks. But something in your eyes tells enough. A stare like frozen fire, ancient and quiet, watching everything like it's deciding whether to break it. They begin testing you in small ways, pushing boundaries. How fast, how far, how much, you pass them all. Your endurance becomes the stuff of whispered tales. You once trained from sunup to moonrise without stopping, until your boots split and your hands bled through their calluses. Someone said you were possessed. You smiled and said, "Not anymore. I invited it in." Raids come, battles follow, and every time you're there, first into the fray, last to leave. You fight without armor, shirtless, even in winter. You carry 2 weapons now, hunger, your axe, and whisper, your war club. Both are marked with scratches, runes, and stories. You never polish them. You say they fight better when they're angry. In combat, you're no longer just fierce. You're something else. You don't block. You absorb. You don't swing. You tear. You howl when blood hits snow. You've been hit, stabbed, burned, and you keep going. Like pain is something that happens around you, not to you. One man said, you smiled after being struck with a hammer. You told him, good, now I feel awake. It's not just strength, it's your presence. Armies shift when you appear, enemies hesitate. You've become a figure in stories told by firelight. The one who laughs through war, the shirtless storm, the bloodbound. Once, during a siege, the enemy shouted terms of surrender before your warband even reached the gates. Later, a captured scout admitted they'd seen you, bare-chested, snarling, eyes wild, and assumed the gods had sent a punishment. You weren't insulted, you were flattered. You begin to feel the pull of something bigger, not just battle, but purpose. Odin's name comes up often now when people speak of you. Some say you've been touched by him. Others say you are him, in part. You know the truth. The gods didn't give you this. You took it. Your name, whatever it used to be, becomes a whisper passed between war camps, village halls, and trembling soldiers. And then, the final test. A northern warlord, infamous for his brutality, lays siege to coastal villages under the cover of winter. The Jarl calls for every warrior, every sword, and he calls for you, not to join, to lead. It's not a request. You're given command of 30 berserkers, men and women who've felt the same fire, walked the same forest, howled the same storm-born cry. They don't salute you, they don't kneel, they simply follow, because they know, the night before the battle, you don't sleep. You sit by a frozen lake, bare arms resting on your knees, breath fogging in the still air. Thoric sits beside you, older now, but still faithful. You talk to the wind, not to ask for victory, to promise a reckoning. At dawn, you charge, no horn, no speech, just you, roaring across the snow, your warband behind you like thunder given form. The battle is savage. Your axe never stops moving. Your war club breaks shields like eggshells. You are hit again and again, but it doesn't matter. You swing harder. You laugh harder. You reach the warlord last. Bloodied, furious, glowing with something ancient. He calls you a demon. You say, wrong god, and you end him. The enemy breaks. Some surrender. Others flee into the woods, pursued by your warband, like wolves on fire. When it's over, the field is quiet, except for your breathing. Deep, calm, still alive. You look up at the sky, and the sky doesn't blink. It recognizes you. You've done it. Not just survived, become, not just feared, remembered. That night, there's a feast in your name. Songs are sung, ale flows. Someone carves your face into a longhouse beam. A boy stares at the image in awe. His father says, that's the one who laughs when cut. You don't stay long. You leave before the ale runs out. Because the path of a berserker never ends in feasts. It ends in fire, in legend, in echoes. You return to the woods, to the cold, to the voice inside that never stopped growling. Because you're not just a warrior. You're a storm in human skin. And you were never meant to sleep quietly. Years pass. Seasons blur like battle scars on the skin of the land. The world changes, slowly. Villages grow into towns. Raiders become traders. The axe is replaced, more often, by the plow. But your name does not change. It echoes in longhouses and around fires. Children dare each other to say it 3 times in the woods. Warriors trace your story into their shields. And every so often, someone claims they saw you walking through the mist, bare-chested, humming to yourself with an axe over your shoulder and a wolfhound at your side. Most believe you're dead. Others believe you never can be, because men die. But storms return. You no longer lead armies. You no longer fight for gold or land. You live on the edge of the world, near the mountains, where the snow never melts and the sky speaks in thunder. You have a small cabin, barely a home, just wood, fire, and silence. Thoric lies beside the hearth, old and half-blind, but loyal. Sometimes he whines in his sleep, chasing dream deer across phantom hills. You pet his head and speak his name like a charm. You don't talk much now, but the forest listens. Sometimes young warriors make pilgrimages to find you. They hike through snow, through fear, carrying nothing but questions. They come looking for secrets, techniques, the truth behind the stories. You give them none. You just nod toward the trees and say, "Go fight something that bites back." Most leave, bruised, humbled, or scared. Some stay. They chop wood, feed the dog, listen when you do speak, and slowly they understand. You weren't born a legend. You bled for it. One night, a child arrives. No warrior, no hunter, just a small, wide-eyed girl with a broken walking stick and a scarf too big for her head. She asks, "Are you the storm man?" You nod. She says, "My brother says you're not real." You hand her a wooden carving, a bear with a scar across its chest. "Now he's wrong twice," you say. She grins, runs home. Stories need an ending, but you don't get one. Not really. Not like the tales say. There's no final battle, no dragon, no blazing sky. Just one more winter, one more fire, one more night. When it comes, it's quiet. Thoric lifts his head, whines once, then rests it on your foot. The wind picks up outside. Snow dances like ash. Your fingers tighten around the haft of hunger, resting beside the door. You look toward the sky one last time and whisper, "I'm still ready." Then, silence. In the spring, a traveler finds your cabin. No body, no blood, just an empty seat, a cold hearth, and a set of footprints leading into the woods. One set and one paw print, side by side. They say your spirit still wanders when the sky growls, that your laugh can be heard when thunder cracks, that those who walk the berserker path sometimes feel your hand on their shoulder, guiding, pushing, reminding. You are not built for peace. You are built for becoming. And when the world forgets how to roar, your story will return, carved in axes, sung in mead halls, and whispered by those who still believe that fury can be beautiful, and that some storms wear skin. The First Messenian War was Sparta's true awakening. Around 743 BCE, the Spartans launched a conquest of the fertile region of Messenia, just west of their own lands. The Messenians were strong, but disorganized. Sparta struck with precision, using phalanx formations that even then were showing their brutal efficiency. After nearly 2 decades of conflict, Messenia fell. But the Spartans didn't just conquer the land, they enslaved the people. These enslaved Messenians were called helots, and they would become the backbone of Spartan economy, forced to farm and serve so that Spartans could focus solely on warfare. It was a dark brilliance. The Spartan soldier never had to work the land. His hands were reserved for sword and shield. But control over Messenia did not come easy. The helots rebelled more than once. The Second Messenian War, erupting around 685 BCE, was a brutal insurrection. The helots rose, backed by external allies. It took nearly 20 years of savage repression, but Sparta crushed the rebellion. By now, the Spartan military system had evolved even further. The Agoge, their brutal education and training system for boys, had begun producing elite warriors who lived, fought, and died for the state. It was in this crucible of internal strife that the Spartans became what the world would later fear: hardened, emotionless, precise. Then came Persia. The Greco-Persian Wars were a turning point, not just for Sparta, but for all of Greece. In 490 BCE, the Persian Empire, the largest the world had ever seen, invaded Greece under King Darius I. Athens famously defeated the Persians at Marathon, but it was only the beginning. 10 years later, in 480 BCE, Darius's son, Xerxes I, launched an invasion of unprecedented scale. Hundreds of thousands of Persian troops marched toward Greece. The Greeks were divided, unsure. Some submitted, others hesitated, but not Sparta. Enter the Battle of Thermopylae, one of the most iconic last stands in history. King Leonidas, a Spartan king, known more for his stoicism than words, marched north with just 300 of his best men, members of his royal bodyguard. They were joined by a few thousand allies, but make no mistake, the spine of that force was Spartan. At the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae, they held the line. Day after day, Persian soldiers charged, only to be broken on the wall of bronze shields and red cloaks. The Spartans fought in phalanx, shoulder to shoulder, moving as one entity, one organism, a living blade. They held for 3 days. It was only when a traitor showed the Persians a secret path through the mountains that the line was broken. Leonidas and his men knew the end had come, but they didn't run. They turned and faced death. They fought until the last man fell. Thermopylae was not a victory, but it became something more powerful, a symbol. The message was clear: Spartans do not surrender. Spartans do not retreat. They die standing. And this sacrifice bought Greece time. In the months that followed, Athens evacuated, and the Greek navy, led by the brilliant Athenian Themistocles, defeated the Persians at Salamis. A year later, in 479 BCE, Sparta took its vengeance at the Battle of Plataea. Led by Pausanias, the Spartans spearheaded the Greek land forces. Their phalanx smashed into the Persian line with methodical fury. The battle was hard-fought, but decisive. The Persian threat was broken. Sparta stood at the height of its power, but the peace was short. The real war was still coming. The Peloponnesian War would be Sparta's greatest test and its undoing. Athens, flush with victory and naval supremacy, had begun building an empire of its own, demanding tribute and enforcing loyalty through its Delian League. Sparta, still conservative and wary of centralized power, formed the Peloponnesian League, a counter-alliance of city-states that resisted Athenian dominance. Tensions grew, skirmishes erupted, and in 431 BCE, war exploded. The Peloponnesian War would last nearly 30 years. It was not one war, but many. Sieges, sea battles, political coups, and betrayals. At its heart, it was a battle of ideology, Athenian democracy, and naval power versus Spartan oligarchy and unmatched infantry. In the early years, Sparta invaded the Athenian countryside, burning crops and challenging them to open battle. But Athens refused to be drawn out. Their navy harassed Spartan coasts. Their city stood protected behind massive walls. The war dragged on. A plague struck Athens in 430 BCE, killing thousands, including their leader, Pericles. For a while, it seemed Sparta might win by attrition alone, but Athens recovered. Then came the Sicilian expedition, a massive Athenian campaign in 415 BCE to conquer Syracuse, an ally of Sparta. It was a disaster. Sparta supported Syracuse. Athens lost tens of thousands of men, ships, and prestige. Sensing weakness, Sparta struck harder. But even then, the war teetered, until Persia, once their enemy, switched sides, funding the Spartan navy in exchange for influence over Asia Minor. With Persian gold, Sparta finally built a fleet strong enough to challenge Athens at sea. In 405 BCE, at Aigos Potami, Sparta's admiral Lysander destroyed the Athenian navy. Cut off from supplies, Athens surrendered the next year. Sparta had won. They dismantled the Athenian walls. They dissolved the Delian League. They imposed oligarchic rule. Sparta was now the undisputed master of Greece. But victory came with a cost. The Spartan system was built on simplicity, discipline, and isolation. Empire demanded complexity, diplomacy, and control. Sparta had no experience with any of it. The Helots grew restless again. Former allies grew resentful. Athens, though wounded, still burned with ambition. And Sparta, always wary of foreign ideas, struggled to govern a world it had never wanted to rule. Then came Thebes. Once a Spartan ally, Thebes began to rise as a new power. In 371 BCE, the Spartans marched to put them back in place. At the Battle of Leuctra, they met something they hadn't expected: innovation. The Theban general Epaminondas deployed a new tactic, a deep, oblique phalanx formation that crushed the Spartan right flank. For the first time in over 300 years, Sparta suffered a devastating defeat on land. Worse, many of its best warriors died in that single battle. Sparta would never fully recover. In the years that followed, they lost control of Messenia. The Helots were freed. The economic backbone of Sparta collapsed. They remained proud, still feared, still dangerous. But the age of Spartan dominance was over. By the time Philip II of Macedon rose to power, father of Alexander the Great, Sparta was sidelined. They refused to join his campaigns. They refused to submit. Even Alexander himself left them alone, saying, "If I conquer everything else, Sparta will still remain Sparta." It was both respect and warning. Eventually, the Romans came, and even they hesitated before confronting Sparta. The city resisted modernity, clinging to its ancient ways. When Rome finally absorbed Greece, Sparta remained a curiosity, not a threat, but a legend. A living museum of discipline and dust, and yet, the legacy of Sparta never faded. Its wars, from the blood-soaked fields of Messenia to the narrow pass of Thermopylae, from the shattered walls of Athens to the doomed charge at Leuctra, became the fabric of history. More than tactics, more than territory, the Spartan wars taught the world something else. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand anyway. That discipline, when honed properly, becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. That a small, committed force can shake the foundations of empires. Today, when we say Spartan, we don't mean just a citizen of an old Greek city. We mean hard, focused, relentless. We mean men and women who understand that greatness isn't a gift, it's forged through pain, through sacrifice, through war. The backbone of society, and warfare was the highest calling. Death held a sacred, solemn, and almost revered place in the hearts of its people. The Spartans were not merely warriors by birth or duty, they were shaped from childhood to greet death as a companion, a culmination of honor rather than an end to be feared. To die well was to live well, and the customs surrounding death reflected the stoic, communal, and deeply symbolic values of Spartan society. Unlike many of their Greek counterparts, who built elaborate tombs or practiced extensive mourning rituals, the Spartans viewed excessive grief as weakness and vanity. Their approach to death was stark, direct, and deeply tied to their belief in duty and sacrifice. Spartan funerary customs served not only to honor the dead, but also to reinforce the values of discipline, courage, and selflessness in the living. Childhood and the first brush with death's Spartan life, from the very beginning, danced in the shadow of mortality. When a child was born, it was not immediately welcomed with joy. The infant was presented to the elders of the tribe, particularly the ephors, the magistrates of the Spartan state, who examined the child thoroughly. If it was deemed healthy, strong, and fit to contribute to the state, it was allowed to live. If not, it was cast away abandoned in the chasm at the foot of Mount Taygetus, known ominously as Apothete. Here, infants considered unworthy of Spartan life met a cold and silent death, reinforcing the brutal philosophy that Sparta was no place for weakness. This ritualistic exposure wasn't cruelty for its own sake. To the Spartans, it was an act of purification, a culling of future burdens from the city's fate. Life itself was a battlefield, and only those who could contribute to the state were allowed to remain in it. Death in battle, the greatest honor. The pinnacle of Spartan death was to fall on the battlefield. Dying in war was not merely acceptably, was aspirational. The greatest honor a Spartan could achieve was to perish while fighting for the state, preferably in the front lines, shield in hand. "Return with your shield door on it," mothers would tell their sons. This phrase encapsulated the entire Spartan ethic: victory or honorable death. Men who died in combat were buried with respect, but not with fanfare. Their names were etched onto stone only if they died in battle. Unlike in Athens or Corinth, where men had grand tombstones with poetic inscriptions, a fallen Spartan esgrave bore only his name and the phrase, "He died in war." No date, no cause, no family lineage. The act itself, fighting and falling, was enough, but the martial code extended to women as well. Spartan women, unique among Greek city-states, held a particular place in the funerary landscape. Only two kinds of people were granted marked graves in Sparta: men who died in battle and women who died during childbirth. The logic was consistent with their values. Both acts were seen as ultimate sacrifices for the state. Just as a warrior gave his body for war, a mother gave hers to birth the future defenders of Sparta. These women were honored quietly but meaningfully. Their graves were marked just like the fallen warriors, making no distinction between their contributions. Funerary practices, simple yet sacred. While other Greek city-states might engage in days-long mourning rituals, sacrificial feasts, and theatrical lamentations, Spartan funerary customs were stripped of indulgence. When a Spartan died, the burial occurred swiftly, often within a day. This quick transition from life to grave was not only practical but philosophical. Spartans did not cling to the dead. They celebrated duty fulfilled. The funeral itself was modest. The body was wrapped in a red cloak, a symbol of the Spartan military, and buried without elaborate preparation. Cremation, popular in other parts of Greece, was rarely practiced. Instead, inhumation, the burial of the body, was the norm, often in unmarked or minimally marked graves. The color red, associated with war and valor, served as a final garment, a farewell of dignity and honor. Family members were discouraged from loud mourning. Excessive weeping or displays of sorrow were frowned upon. In fact, public grief was considered shameful. Death was to be faced with the same unflinching resolve as combat. Spartan mothers were known to say that if their sons died bravely, they had nothing to mourn, and if they fled or brought shame, they were already dead to them. The ritual of silence, one of the most striking features of Spartan funerary tradition, was the silence that accompanied it. The absence of grief in public was not emotional suppression, it was a ritual of strength. In silence, the Spartans expressed their deepest respect. Loud wails were reserved for cowards, for those whose lives did not uphold the Spartan code, but for warriors. For mothers who bore the next generation of warriors, silence was the loudest expression of reverence. In fact, funerary speeches were rare. Unlike in Athens, where orators would give elaborate eulogies, Sparta did not allow words to decorate death. Life was judged by action, not description. Your deeds spoke for you. If they didn't, no words could redeem you. Kings and their burials. Even Spartan kings, though set apart in rank, were not exempt from simplicity, though their funerals were the only exceptions to the state's otherwise strict uniformity. The death of a Spartan king triggered a unique chain of rituals. Horses were killed in his honor. A statewide mourning period of 10 days ensued, during which no assemblies were held, and the entire city entered a temporary stillness. Despite this added ceremony, the king's burial was still humble compared to the ornate royal tombs of foreign lands. His body was buried, not burned, and often placed in a plain tomb near the Eurotas River or within the city's limits. He was mourned not as a ruler of luxury, but as a servant of the state. It is worth noting that Sparta had 2 kings ruling simultaneously, a unique system among Greek poleis. When one king died, the dual monarchy ensured continuity. But both were expected to lead in battle, and both were subject to the same martial code as the people. A king who died in war was honored, yes, but not glorified beyond recognition. His greatness was measured by loyalty, not wealth, Spartan afterlife, belief, or discipline. The spiritual side of Spartan death is shrouded in silence, while the rest of Greece indulged in rich mythology about the underworld, Hades, and the journeys of the soul. Spartans appeared unconcerned with such narratives. This doesn't mean they lacked belief. It means their focus was practical. The afterlife was not denied, but it wasn't emphasized. What mattered was legacy, not eternity. The soul, they believed, lived on in reputation and memory, not in a mystical realm. A Spartan who died with honor was immortal not because his soul floated in the Elysian fields, but because his name would be remembered as an example. Memory was immortality. Dishonor, by contrast, erased a man from the collective consciousness. Cowards and deserters were not mourned, they were forgotten. Hero cults and remembrance. Although they lacked grand funerary traditions, the Spartans did develop a form of hero cult, especially for legendary warriors. One of the most notable examples is Leonidas, the king who fell at Thermopylae. His bravery inspired a cult following long after his death. His body was eventually returned to Sparta decades after the battle, and a tomb was erected to honor him, a rare exception to the usual anonymity of Spartan graves. This tomb, and the hero worship surrounding Leonidas, show that while Spartans valued humility in death, they made room for symbols of collective memory. These symbols were not personal tributes, but nationalistic beacons, reminders to future Spartans of the cost and value of sacrifice. Annual festivals, such as the Gymnopedia, which celebrated Spartan warriors, included remembrances of the fallen. Here, the names of heroic dead were sung and their deeds reenacted by youth in training. It was less about mourning and more about reinforcement, embedding their legacy into the psyche of the state. In the winding, lantern-lit alleyways of Edo period Japan, where wooden sandals clacked against cobbled streets and the scent of grilled eel drifted through paper-walled tea-houses, there existed a world just beneath the surface, etched into the skin of men and women who bore not only ink but entire legacies on their bodies. This was the world of horomono, the traditional Japanese tattoo, a practice that flourished quietly in a society bound by rigid class structures, warrior codes, and a deep reverence for both the body and the spiritual. Tattooing in Edo, Japan, roughly from 1603 to 1868, was more than decoration. It was storytelling, rebellion, remembrance, and sometimes punishment. And though the art form would later be associated with crime syndicates and secrecy, its origins were deeply rooted in honor, mythology, and a uniquely Japanese aesthetic that celebrated the union of body and story. To understand Edo tattooing, one must first understand Edo society. Under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered a long period of peace and isolation. With samurai no longer needed on the battlefield, their function shifted. Merchants gained wealth, artisans gained prestige, and a new urban class emerged. One that found identity not in status, since social mobility was restricted, but in expression. And for some, that expression came in the form of tattoos. At the center of this body art culture was the irizumi, a full-body tattoo style that could take years to complete, done entirely by hand using sharpened needles and ink made from charcoal, soot, or natural pigments. These tattoos were dense, elaborate, and symbolic. They told stories drawn from Japan's most famous texts, the Suikoden, a Chinese tale of outlaw heroes, the tale of the hike, about the rise and fall of warrior clans, and folk tales filled with dragons, tigers, lotus blossoms, and phoenixes. Each figure etched into skin was selected with care. A koi fish swimming upstream, for instance, was a symbol of perseverance. A dragon wrapped around a man's arm might represent wisdom and strength. A woman with a snake tattooed along her back might carry both beauty and danger. The wearer of these tattoos wasn't merely choosing artwork, they were choosing identity. Tattooing was not officially sanctioned. In fact, Edo Japan had strict laws governing appearances, particularly for the samurai class and higher status individuals. But in the world of firemen, laborers, gamblers, and craftsmen, tattoos became a mark of grit, skill, and courage. The Haikishi, or firemen of Edo, became especially known for their full-body tattoos. Fighting fires in a city built almost entirely of wood was a death-defying act, and these men faced the flames with nothing but their skin and courage. Their tattoos were talismans, often believed to protect them from harm, and also a declaration of their bravery. The process of receiving a tattoo was grueling. There were no machines, just sharpened metal or bamboo rods tied with fine needles, dipped into thick ink and stabbed rhythmically into the skin. The sessions were long, sometimes lasting 6 hours at a time. Healing was slow, painful, and often done in private. But the result was a masterpiece. The tattoo was not just on the skin. It became part of the person, moving, flexing, and aging with them. Tattoo artists, called horishi, were revered in underground circles. Many worked anonymously, or used art names passed from teacher to student. They often came from woodblock printing traditions, which explains the stylistic overlap between Edo tattoos and ukiyo art. Artists like Kuniyoshi, whose illustrations of warrior heroes bristled with energy and danger, directly influenced the motifs seen in full-body tattoos. Horishi were not only craftsmen, they were surgeons of beauty and pain, cutting into the skin with careful precision. Their studios were hidden, their clientele loyal, and their tools kept razor sharp. The ink they used was Nara ink, black in appearance, but under the skin would develop into shades of blue-green, a hue that would become synonymous with traditional Japanese tattoos. Despite the artistry, tattooing also had a darker connotation. The government often used tattoos as a form of punishment. Criminals were marked permanently, often on the forehead, arms, or neck with simple symbols indicating their crime or place of conviction. This branding marked them as outcasts even after their sentence had ended. It was both a punishment and a life sentence in shame. For many, however, this stigma would eventually morph into defiance. Some criminals began adding to their government-imposed marks, surrounding them with tattoos of their own choosing, turning disgrace into personal expression. By the mid-18th century, tattooing had exploded in popularity among the chunin, or townspeople. Forbidden from wearing luxurious clothing or flaunting wealth due to sumptuary laws, they turned to the hidden canvas of the body. A merchant might dress plainly, but beneath his robe carried an entire world of dragons and ghosts. A gambler might walk unnoticed by day, but when his robe fell away in the gambling den, his tattooed skin told a different story, one of danger, charm, and fearlessness. Women also participated, though less frequently. Some were courtesans or entertainers who tattooed the name of a lover onto their thigh or wrist. Others adorned themselves with symbols of eternal love or devotion. There were even cases of lovers tattooing matching characters onto their bodies, binding themselves together in ink. In a society that prized subtlety and control, these acts were radical declarations of desire and permanence. As the Edo period came to a close, Western influence began to seep into Japan. With the Meiji Restoration in 1868, the new government sought to modernize and civilize in the eyes of the West. Tattoos, seen as barbaric and backward, were outlawed. Tattoo artists were forced underground. Foreigners, ironically, became fascinated with the very thing Japan was trying to erase. Royal Navy officers and foreign diplomats sought out horishi in secret, sitting through hours of pain to carry home exotic inked souvenirs from the mysterious East. Despite legal restrictions, the art of tattooing persisted, growing more refined in secrecy. During this time, tattooing became increasingly associated with the Yakuza, Japan's organized crime groups. For these men, tattoos served multiple purposes: identification, loyalty, intimidation, and personal myth-making. The full-body irizumi, hidden beneath suits and yukata, marked their allegiance and their refusal to live by mainstream norms. Yakuza tattoos were rand still aura commitment. Getting one could take years. Designs expanded to cover the back, chest, arms, thighs, and calves, leaving only a vertical strip down the middle, bara style, called muniwari, so one could wear open robes without revealing their ink in public. The motifs remained traditional: koi, tigers, deities, oni, demons, cherry blossoms, and waves. The meanings shifted subtly. A tattooed tiger might represent not just strength, but a lone fighter. An image of the deity Fudo-Mayo might reflect discipline and loyalty to a code, however twisted that code might be. As the 20th century progressed, tattoos remained illegal until 1948, when the American occupation of Japan lifted the ban. But by then, the association with the Yakuza was deeply ingrained in the public consciousness. Even today, many bathhouses and gyms in Japan refuse entry to anyone with tattoos, no matter how artistic or culturally significant they may be. Yet, in parallel, a new generation of tattoo artists began to reclaim the art form. The traditions of Edo tattooing, its tools, techniques, and motifs were preserved and passed down. Some harishi continued to work entirely by hand, a method called tebari, while others embraced modern machines. International interest surged. Tattoo collectors from Europe and America began traveling to Japan to receive authentic irizumi, often waiting years for an appointment with master artists. Museums began showcasing Edo tattoo art. Scholars traced its lineage back to prehistoric times, and slowly, Japan itself began to rediscover the beauty of what had long been hidden. Modern tattoo artists today walk a delicate line between heritage and innovation, secrecy and celebration. Even now, tattooing in Japan retains a whisper of the forbidden, a shadow of its Edo past. But for those who understand its history, every line of ink tells a story deeper than skin. It's the story of resilience, rebellion, and reverence, of anonymous firemen staring down death, of gamblers staking their souls, of lovers pledging themselves in permanent marks, of artists turning pain into poetry. To be tattooed in Edo, Japan, was to be part of an underground tradition older than the nation itself. It was a rite of passage, an act of devotion, and a declaration of selfhood in a society obsessed with surface. Beneath the silk robes and quiet politeness beat the heart of a culture that knew the body was not merely flesh, but canvas, shrine, and battlefield.